Welcome back to our study on the book of Romans. This is the Sonship Review Part 2, and this is Session 8. Y'all are staying?
We're going to hang out with the grandparents.
Did you think it was contagious? Okay, I'm just kidding. All right, let's get back to where we were. Romans chapter 6, verse 4. Our old identity in Adam was put to death with Christ on the cross. And then, here's the second thing about verse 4. We do not just lose our old identity, we gain a new identity in Christ, which enables us to walk in newness of life. So it's not just He's doing away with the old one, He's going to replace it with a new one. And remember, that's what verse 4, that it says, just as Christ was raised up from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we also should walk in newness of life. And He is making that provision for us. Okay, now Romans chapter 6, verse 5. For if we have been planted together in the likeness of His death, we shall be also in the likeness of His resurrection. So you see, there's something accomplished in the death of Christ on the cross, and something else accomplished, this new identity, in His resurrection. So we have two main things that are happening here. The first one is, we are made to be dead to sin by being planted in the likeness of His death. And the second one is, we're enabled to walk in newness of life by being in the likeness of His resurrection. Even though I have talked to you about that, look, you need to make the connection. Being made dead to sin is done by taking that old man and putting it to death. I'm going to talk about the details of that in just a moment. So, before we do that, let's look at verse 6, which is going to pick up on this theme in verse 5 and continue it. Knowing this, that our old man is crucified with Him. And so, this is what we're talking about. Our old man is crucified with Him, that the body of sin might be destroyed, that henceforth we should not serve sin. Look, before, the only one we could sin, the only one we could serve before we got saved was sin. Because even the righteousness, we didn't commit righteousness, but even the good deeds that we didn't amount to anything because they were produced out of a sin nature.
A fleshly nature.
They were produced out of our flesh. That wasn't anything about God in it. And so, those were not holy. Those were not righteous. But once you get saved, and that old nature is now replaced with a new identity in Christ, now, and here's what you have. You now have the ability to choose who is going to be the one you're going to follow. Are you going to continue in sin, and serve sin, or are you going to now serve the Lord in righteousness? And you have a choice to make. And now we got off at that last one. I made a statement. We talked about it a little bit at the break. No, I have this on a PowerPoint, so I'm going to wait until I get that on the PowerPoint. So this verse 6 that's happening here, it's our old man was crucified with Christ. The second aspect is crucifying our old man destroyed the body of sin, and crucifying our old man made it possible to serve God instead of sin. Karen?
Is that why maybe the traditions of man want the water baptism? Because it's a purification, but it's actually a public declaration?
You know what it was? It was a symbol of that. Now look, there's some interesting questions here. I'm going to repeat your question because the people on the DVD want to hear what we're talking about. You're saying, is this why so many people want to equate baptisms with a water baptism? Because a baptism is a purification. You understand that in the Old Testament, when someone came in contact with a leper, and they were unclean, they were considered to be, because remember, that's why they were supposed to carry the sign and holler, unclean, unclean. Everybody could stay away from them. But if you came in contact with them, you were considered unclean until the evening. And then what you had to do is you had to go outside the camp and you had to bathe yourself and wash your clothes. You know what those were? Those were baptisms.
But when I got baptized,
Right, right. I did the same thing. It was in a Baptist church. Yeah, that mantra was pretty much the same. Buried with him by baptism unto death, raised to walk in newness of life. But this baptism doesn't have anything to do with water.
Is that not why people came to that tradition? It's because they don't understand it's the flesh versus the spirit.
I think so. I think that's a part of it for a lot of people, that what they want to do is they want to equate a ritual with the actual doing of it. But see, today, when a person trusts Jesus Christ, do they need to get baptized in water? No, because the real baptism takes place in your inner man. And that's the one that actually does the work. But look, here's what I was going to say. Back in the Old Testament, before Christ had died on the cross, how did God treat their sins? There was a particular word that we discovered. Yes, they were in remission, which means the penalty for those sins was postponed. What did they do? There was something they did in Israel's program.
The sacrifices?
The Day of Atonement with the blood of bulls and goats, and God would see that, and you know what He would do? He would forgive the sins of the people, or He would put off the consequences of those sins for how long? 1 year. And then they had every year on the Day of Atonement, that had to be repeated. But then when you get over to the book of Hebrews, let's just turn there and look at this. In Hebrews, because he's talking to the believing remnant about this issue. And I want to say, well, I went too far. I want to say chapter 9. If I can get back over there. Pages are sticking. Hebrews chapter 9. Let's see. Okay. Look at verse. It says, verse 11. But Christ being come and high priest of good things to come by a greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is to say, not of this building, neither by the blood of goats and of calves, but by His own blood He entered in once into the holy place, having obtained eternal redemption for us. For if the blood of bulls and goats and the ashes of an heifer sprinkling the unclean sanctify to the purifying of the flesh, how much more shall the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered Himself without spot to God? You know what he's saying here? Yes, there's some rituals that you guys participated in, but if those rituals did what they did, which was all temporary in nature, just think how much more the blood of Christ can achieve than the blood of bulls and goats. There's one more thing that I'm after here, and that is, let's see, I'm looking for this. It's also another verse about the blood of bulls and goats. It says,
19, I believe.
Let's see, it says, according to, he took the blood of calves and goats. No, I'm looking for the one, Bud, that says, for it is impossible that the blood of bulls and goats should take away sin. Let's see, the mediator of the New Testament, 19, the blood of the testament, sprinkled with blood. Maybe I'm not in the right chapter. Oh, it's 10. 10. Look at, he's talking about those old things. See verse 1, for the law having a shadow of good things to come. The law talked about those Old Testament sacrifices, and they were a shadow of the good things to come, which of course, talking about what Christ would do. Then look, he says, for the law having a shadow of good things to come, and not the very image of the things, can never, with those sacrifices which they offered year by year, continually make the comers thereunto perfect. For then would they not have ceased to be offered? He says, hey, the sacrifice of bulls and goats couldn't make anyone perfect. If they could have, they could have quit offering them. But they couldn't do that. So then verse 2, because that the worshipers once purged would have had no more conscience of sins. But in those sacrifices there's a remembrance again made of sins every year. Why? Verse 4, for it is not possible that the blood of bulls and of goats should take away sins. So in other words, you know what all that was back here? Was the blood of bulls and goats actually taking away sins? No. The only thing they were doing was giving God a basis to postpone the consequences or the penalty of those sins. That's all that did. But when Christ comes, He does away with that. And Hebrews is going to talk about He made one sacrifice forever, and that was enough to do everybody. And then He sat down on the right hand of the Father. That's my whole point behind that idea about everybody gets all stoked up. They get those letters from TV and radio programs that talk about we need to rebuild the temple, and the stones are in tractor trailers now ready to be shipped to Israel, like Israel needs rock. If you've ever been over there, you know better than that. But you know what? And they're going to rebuild the temple. Why are they in a hurry to rebuild the temple? So they can reinstitute the sacrifices. The believing remnant is told in Hebrews those sacrifices couldn't do the thing that needed to be done. They were a shadow of that which was to come. Now that the real thing is here, don't go back in there and participate in those sacrifices. You're trampling underfoot the blood of the Son of God when you do that and making it of none effect. I'm quoting the verses here. In other words, you're acting like this. What He did here wasn't good enough. You've got to go back and get the ritual going again. You know why? The flesh loves ritual. It loves to, that's what it hangs its hat on. And so,
I'm sorry I took you down that, but I was curious. Why,
Yeah, well, see, that raises an interesting question. Just think with me about this. I'm not prepared to teach this. I mean, it's not like it's part of the notes, But I'm always prepared to talk. But look, just think with me a moment. If the sacrifice hasn't been made yet, by faith, by believing what they were supposed to believe, could they be justified? Yes, but guess what? Their sins were in remission. They couldn't really be paid for until the redemption was made on the cross, right? There's the point. It kind of makes you think that other than the ritual, which was a shadow of things to come, they didn't have a sanctification. The ability to live for God, you know what they had? They had the law. And you know what? And everything was based off of how you did the law. If you broke the law, what'd you get? You got punishments. And if you kept the law, you got blessings. And what was the power to keep the law? Where was the power? Think with me. Because the power wasn't in grace, because it's a dispensation of performance. Yeah, but where's the power to obey? The only power they had. Yeah, it was just a power they could generate in their flesh. What else was there? There wasn't anything else. So that's why Paul is going to come along and talk about it's not the law, and it's not your flesh's ability to keep that law. This is now going to be something that is going to be accomplished in you, not you just going, okay, I'm just going to try to keep the rules.
Okay, so if we take it down to the very primitive stage, Christ dying on the cross killed His flesh, period. But His resurrection was in a spirit, and that's what He's hoping for us to do.
Here.
This is basic. I said He was...
Okay, I just want to tweak one word. When He dies on the cross, He kills our sin nature, our old identity in Adam. Everything that was bad about us. We were under sin. We were unrighteous. We were enemies of God. When you talk about the aspects of our identity, we were alive unto sin. Do you know why? It's the only thing we could serve. Because we're sinners by nature, we couldn't serve God. Nothing was holy. Nothing could be accepted by Him. So when He made us dead to sin, He wasn't saying, I killed off sin for you so you won't have a problem with sin anymore. What He did is He killed that old identity off so that now you do have the ability to live for God. But it's still a choice that you're going to have to make. In fact, go back to Romans 6, and let me just read this for you. This is exactly the way Paul is going to present this. In Romans chapter 6, look with me down here. Look at verse 16. Know ye not that to whom ye yield yourselves servants to obey, His servants ye are to whom ye obey, rather of sin unto death or of obedience unto righteousness. Doesn't that look to you like I now have a choice of which one I'm going to serve? I can do one or the other. Just keep reading. Let's see. Verse 19. I speak after the manner of men because of the infirmity of your flesh. For as ye have, this is in the time before they were saved, yielded your members service to uncleanness and to iniquity unto iniquity, even so now that you're saved, even so now yield your members servants to righteousness unto holiness. For when ye were the servants of sin, you were free from righteousness. You know what that means? When you were the servants of sin, when you were sinners by nature, when your old man and your old identity in Adam is all you had, you were free from righteousness. There was nothing you could do to be righteous. So here's what He did. When He put our old man on the cross and crucified, look, yes, we're identified with Christ in His baptism, and because we are, He was able to take our old man and put him to death on the cross. But because He didn't redeem this body, it still has sin in its members. So He's not doing that for the purpose of taking away sin. If He wanted to do that, you know what He would have done? He'd have given you a glorified body the moment you got saved, and the presence of sin would no longer... Where did I write that down here? Come on, I did this. Here. Yeah, if He just wanted to get rid of sin, He'd have given us our glorified body and we wouldn't have a presence of sin anymore. And guess what? The whole thing would be taken care of. That's,
But His will is to use our earthly vessels and become...
You know what? That's right. But to transform us by the power of His grace into the sons and daughters that we desire to be. So when He exalts us in the ages to come, it won't just be the fact that He just took dumb old lumps of clay and decided to, make kings out of them. The Bible talks about that in Proverbs. If you take I'm not trying to do a class thing here, but he talks about if you take these despicable people that are in your society and you elevate them to kings, then the whole society goes to pot because they don't have the ability to do anything. They've been... All right. There's a principle in business.
If you're going to do a potter's wheel and everything, you shape it and then you heat it and then you can paint it.
Yes?
So what we're doing is God's already put us together as that pot. Our education and our sufferings is going to be the fire.
In a sense, you could say, in that analogy, it would be the fire.
So everything that we put together is going to paint.
Yes, so He has made you to be something, and now He's educating you to live like the person you have been made to be.
So the paint would be on display for His glory.
I would say the paint would be your exaltation. Okay.
Like I said, I've got to get down to the primal. I've got to get down to the brass tacks because otherwise it's kind of like, okay, then why does that happen and why does
Right.
that happen?
Bud?
When we was talking a while ago about how, in the church they did the, dead, buried, resurrected.
Mm-hmm.
And they were using Romans 6 as a template for that. But what I'm seeing is, you've already said it several times that we're not exalted yet.
Right.
We still have our fleshly bodies that still have a sin nature in them. Our bodies do, because they're not glorified.
They're not glorified. They still have sin in them, yes.
Right. They still have sin in them. But in the 5th verse, it says, we shall be also in the likeness of His resurrection, which has not happened yet, right?
Okay, here's what I'm taking that to mean. I don't think that's talking about our body.
Okay.
I think that's talking about the new man, which is this.
Yeah, but, okay.
In other words, how... Well, see,
Is
here...
that part of the blessed
I was just thinking that.
Okay, no, I see what you're saying. So let's look at that verse. What verse are you in? 5?
Number 5.
Yeah. For if we have been planted together in likeness death, we shall be also. Oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying that looks to you like that's a future exaltation issue. And if you want to read it that way, then what you're seeing there is absolutely true.
I'm not reading it right.
Well, I'm going to say, you know what you're reading it as would be a true thing, but I think in the context of what he's discussing, he's not talking about our glorified body or our position in the heavenly places. He's talking about not obeying sin in the lust thereof. And he says the only reason that things are different now is because if your old man was crucified and done away with, then your newness, your ability to walk in newness of life is to walk out of the new man. To walk out of the fact that I'm not under sin, I'm forgiven. Now this is justification issues. So what are the sanctification issues? Well, here's the first one, that I'm dead to sin. In other words, now I have the ability. Before, I couldn't please God no matter what I did because I was just a sinner by nature. But now that the old man has been crucified and I've been raised, not physically, this body, but I've been raised to walk in newness of life in Christ's resurrection. In other words, now I'm dead to sin. There's another. See, I don't know how to work this in. There's another phrase in here that goes hand in hand with that. And I am not only dead to sin, I'm alive unto God. See, that's what I'm saying. The death killed the old nature, but the resurrection now gives us functional life that we can live for God every day. And the reason I say it that way is because that's the context of, the whole passage here. Is everybody following? This is an excellent question that was
all about legal standing. Our legal standing with God.
Okay, Mark is asking, I'm saying it for the DVD. Mark is saying, is this all about our legal standing before God? All right, I'm glad he asked that question. I almost wish I had planted him to do that, because this is perfect. It is about our standing, but he wants it to be more than that. He wants it to be the practical reality of our living out of that standing. Clifford and I were talking at the break. Let's suppose a guy has kids. That makes him what? A father, a dad, right? Now he's a dad. Does that mean he's a good dad? What if he thinks, these kids are cramping my style? I want I remember seeing the commercial, the guy at the car lot, and he buys this little 2-seater sports car. It sits about this high off the ground, and it's all sleek, and he pulls up in the driveway, and when he pulls up, the wife is out in the yard watering the grass, and there's 3 kids around her. It's got 2 seats in it. He's obviously got 5 people in his family. Now, I know it's a funny commercial, but my point is, now that he is a dad, what is his responsibility? To make decisions out of the status of being a dad. So, is it just supposed to be a status? It is a status, but what else is it supposed to be? That's supposed to be moved into the reality of his everyday life, right? So he begins to live out of that understanding. So, this is the same way we're talking about here. We're not who we used to be. Now we're someone different. And now God is saying, and I want you to, Mark's right, it is a status. But what your Father is doing is moving you from just saying, that's my status, to realizing, this is who I really am, and I now have a responsibility to live out of that status every day.
So you go from waif to adopted son.
You go from what to it?
Waif, what is the word? The little orphan.
Well, no, an orphan, okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, you know what? You're going from, actually.
Our adoption when we're saved.
I'm sorry?
We receive our adoption when we're saved.
We receive our adoption when we're
Sam cried out, "Father."
we haven't been offered a chance to labor in the business yet, right? When we get saved, we're part of the family, but we're children, and yeah, and right.
But when you're saying functional life, you're talking about now we demonstrate His grace
There you go.
In our daily life.
in our daily life.
Right.
Which is what sanctification is doing. Functional
Yes, sir.
There you go.
is
That's what I thought.
demonstrating.
Come up here and say it in this microphone because that was perfect. Say that again. I want to repeat it.
That we are demonstrating His grace through our functional life in our sanctification.
We're demonstrating His grace. We're displaying His grace through our functional life that comes out of the sanctification that He provided to us. And if He hadn't sanctified us, nothing we ever did would be able to be unto holiness. Can I show you one more verse in Romans 6? Look, I know it's kind of, one more verse out of the study. Look down at the bottom, verse 19. Let's see, wait a minute. I'm sorry, 22. But now, being made free from sin and become servants to God, ye have your fruit unto holiness. In other words, see, we would tend to say, these works we're doing are righteous. They are. But they're unto, in other words, these righteous works have an end that they're serving. And you know what that is? An end that is unto holiness. And what does that mean? That they are in God's, they're set apart for God's service, these works that are considered holy, and they're so clean that God goes, I can have fellowship with that, and I can use that in what I'm doing. It's usable for me. In your notes, I gave you the example of a surgeon's scalpel. When I was in Baton Rouge, before I became part of the permanent church staff, I worked for 6 months at Woman's Hospital. In Baton Rouge, Woman's Hospital, every woman goes to Woman's Hospital to have her baby. That's what it was. It was the hospital you went to have babies. They also had a cancer treatment center, but this was the hospital for babies. And what we had to do was, whenever a surgeon, by the way, when he came in to do any kind of surgery, he didn't just bring a steak knife from the house or go, I got a pocket knife, let me use that. He always used something that was specifically designed for surgery. It's called a scalpel. Though that was something that was set apart for a particular reason. I'm not saying scalpels are holy. They weren't set apart for God's service. But they were set apart for this particular purpose. But you know what? When you went into the hospital cafeteria, did you expect to see knives, spoons, and scalpels? No, because you know what? They weren't for table use. They were set apart for a particular purpose. And here's the other thing we did. We put all those surgical instruments, once they were used, they got put into an autoclave machine. And through a high heat, those instruments were sterilized for their next use. The only reason I point that out is because we have both aspects of holiness right there. Set apart and made clean. And the only way we have any works that are actually able to be serviced to God and able to be so clean that He says, yes, I accept that, is out of what Bud was just saying. We have been given a sanctification. And before, no matter what we did, it wasn't unto holiness. Now we have the ability to do that. But let me ask you a question. Is it automatic? Do you automatically produce holiness in whatever you do? No. So you know all He did in making you dead to sin? He gave us the opportunity to produce holiness. Yes, Bud.
As my friend used to always say, which leads to the next question.
Okay.
You know my buying a whole bowl of hamburger
Right.
scenario that I use.
Yes. Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm going to say it because the DVD won't pick you up. You want to know about the buying a whole bowl of hamburger deal.
Yeah.
All right. Can we talk off the record for a moment? I know the tape is rolling and people, I'm almost tempted to have Mark shut that off right here. What have I got left? 3, 2, 1. I'm almost tempted to shut it off right here. So let me have you make the call. That way I can blame it on y'all. I'm going to talk about something that I'm fairly confident of, but I may not be absolutely right in every detail. You want to take it off the record, or you want to just leave it on the tape? How many say leave it on the tape? How many say take it off?
Well, if you don't feel confident enough about it,
Well, here's what I say. I don't want to debate anybody over it.
you don't want to share it with us, then maybe it'd be best to.
Let me just say it this way. What you're about to hear is something that I would normally just discuss with this group of people, because I'm not being dogmatic about it. I'm not saying it's set in stone and I'll never see anything more about it.
It's probably going to be what my question was.
It is. It's exactly about buying a hobo a hamburger.
Yeah.
Because, look, Clifford asked the same question. If I'm driving home, I know you'll remember, if I'm driving home and I see a guy broke down on the side of the road, if I stop and help that guy, is that, if I just do it because I'm doing it, is that not pleasing to God? Is that living out of the doctrine? Or is that, I mean, what am I doing? What am I doing? Okay, so, oh man, I'm just really tempted to shut this off. What do you think? Let's shut it off. Huh?
No, I wasn't saying to shut it off. I was just going to say that you can't just do something with the expectation that you are living or doing that for God's holiness.
No, that's not an automatic. That's true. That's not an automatic.
I'm talking about helping the guy like.
That's right. Okay, Mark, shut this